I was always sort of curious about Cronin. I thought he was some sort of wizard. I thought he was older than he was. I thought a lot of things, and then he comes, he's like, he's just this guy. But he does the full spectrum. He lives down the street. So here's Cronin.
This is Andrew Paul Cronin, and you're listening to the Q&A with A.P.C., the show that features conversations with artists, cultural figures, policymakers, performers, and other innovators living in Virginia. Episode 39, Linda McGreevy. In 1996, my guest, Linda McGreevy, along with her husband, Tim Cooper, purchased a video store in Norfolk, Virginia. Nearly 25 years later, Naro Expanded Video is still going. Naro Video has survived the death of VHS, the transition to DVDs and Blu-ray, and the tidal wave of video on demand and online streaming services. For a while, however, in 2016, it looked as if Naro Video's time may have run out. In an effort to save the store, Linda McGreevy and her husband donated their entire inventory of some 42,000 titles, obtained nonprofit status, and Naro Expanded Video Archival Library was born. With a wildly successful Kickstarter campaign, which raised $25,000 in just 2 days, Naro Video now stands as the only video store of its size remaining on the entire East Coast. In addition, Linda is a professor emerita in Old Dominion University's Art History Department, where she began teaching in the 1970s. She was one of the first women in America to teach a women's class in art and is known for her accessible, engaging, and informative lectures. She has published several books, is a member of the International Association of Art Critics, and received the National Endowment of the Humanities Fellowship. For more information on Naro Video and Linda McGreevy, visit narovideo.org. Dr. Linda McGreevy, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Glad to be here.
Linda, take us back to 1996 when you and your husband, Tim Cooper, purchased the Naro Video Store from its previous owner. What was the marketplace like for video stores or video rentals in 1996?
Oh, it was great. I mean, it was right at the apex, really, of what was going on. VHS was starting to disappear, and DVDs came in the year that we opened the store. So, well, we opened it with literally nothing but the neon sign and shelving. And so what we did was we brought in our own collection of about 3,000 titles.
Right, so the previous owner who you purchased it from took his collection to Maryland, I think.
He
did.
Is that
right?
He took his collection to Towson and stocked a new store, which has since, of course, disappeared. All of his stores have disappeared. He's a nice guy. He helped us out, but he really didn't leave us any stock. So essentially, the entire collection was ours from the very beginning.
Linda, how do you come to acquire 3,000 videos? I mean, acquiring 3,000 of anything might be a little bit manic, perhaps. But how did you? 3,000 is a tremendous collection of anything, particularly
you
videos.
haven't been in my house. I have 3,000 of everything that I collect, and Tim and I we kept buying videotapes because we liked the movies and we'd watch them occasionally. But mainly, we just stored them in the attic, and finally, we had a use for them. We're pack rats in a way. I mean, we're not hoarders, which is, I think, the best thing about us, but we're definitely pack rats.
What's the difference?
A hoarder?
Yeah.
A hoarder, it's a mess. There is no rhyme or reason, and eventually it sort of becomes chaotic, and you begin to pile up papers and things like that. So we weren't hoarding these things, but we were definitely picking what we liked. Then, of course, when we opened, we had to pick what we thought would sell as well, to our members.
And when you had the 3,000 videos at your home prior to you purchasing the video store, were they displayed, organized, alphabetical? What was that like?
They were organized alphabetically, but they were in our attic, which was restored at the time, so we had bookshelves up there and things like that. It wasn't a complete mess, but it took us about 2 months of really intensive work in the early summer to actually put that store together and make it work. And then, of course, we began to get so many tapes and videos that finally we began to fall out the front door. So I worked the store as well as teaching, and I don't know how I did it.
Did you have discussions about the future of video rentals and what the future of video rentals may be? Because I read a quote where your husband said, this is a 20th century business in the 21st century. And now you purchased the business pretty close to the tail end of the 20th century.
Oh, we did.
So did you know that going into it, that you might be like kind of a step behind the times?
No, I don't think we really knew that, but we feared it. I mean, we're fearful people. We are anxious and always thinking about what's going to go wrong rather than what's going to go right. But we jumped into it because we really felt that the community needed to keep that video store. And when we moved out on Colley Avenue, that was really a very good move because we were right next then, as we are now, to the theater, and we had that good relationship and that presence as a mass on the block. So that helped us a lot.
Talk about the design of the store, particularly how the films are organized and displayed.
I think right now we have about 465 categories, and people keep making little subcategories of that. I mean, it's getting really ridiculous. But we decided that we would have the foreign section, the cult section. You know, we just sort of distributed things around the store in terms of the whole history of American film. So we started with the silence and we move all the way up to contemporary. But then we decided, oh no, we have to take some of these out and put them in literary. And then, of course, we knew the biggest renter in the store would be anything British. So we had to have a big British section.
So it was originally by decade, and then that sort of morphed into different kind of subgenres.
Yes.
Now, did
like
that
film noir?
Did that come from your mind and Tim's mind,
Yes.
or was yes?
Yes, absolutely. Nobody else's. It really, the layout of the store and most of the way the store is organized has to do with myself and Tim.
Linda, people can be intimidated by the store. You've no doubt heard this, I'm sure. And it's not just the sheer volume of movies that's overwhelming. It's that Naro video takes cinema very seriously. It's tangible. You can feel it when you come in there.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
talk
that's
about
good.
that?
That's good. Well, you know, one of the things that we did recently was to put together a kind of map of the store, which does help people. You know, no, we're not snobs. We do have a snob side to us, but that only comes out in the presence of other snobs.
Linda, how did you decide what types of films you wouldn't rent out? Like, there's no adult films.
No.
What were those discussions like?
We really didn't have many discussions about the adult films. We do have a few, but they have to be soft and softcore, I guess you'd call it, and they have to have some semblance of a plot. We will not deal with those films that are just bonk films. It's disgusting, and I really put my feet down on that one. I said, we're not going to have a back room with a curtain in front of it.
It changes it.
It does. It
Right.
changes it. It makes it a bit lewd and louche, and we're a little more high tone than that.
Is there a movie or TV show that you've wanted but never been able to get?
Oh my Lord. Probably, yeah. There are so many things that are out of print now. I mean, what I'm doing at the moment with this list of what we're actually giving to the store, because up until 2 years ago, everything still belongs to us except for the things we've gotten since then. And I was going along making a list of everything we had, so I knew what was there. And now I'm going through Amazon and other, eBay sites, and so much is so out of print that it's frightening. People are going to streaming, and the DVDs are beginning to disappear as much as the VHS have done. So, yeah, there's a lot that we've never been able to get a hold of. And every once in a while, Tim will say, well, this has never been on DVD or VHS, and I don't know why. Sometimes that's because the families of someone involved in the film, usually an older one, won't allow it to be shown, won't allow it to be bought, So a lot of different reasons for that. I can't think of any particular title, but I know that some of our avant-garde films are worth $600 and some odd. Now, we paid maybe $25 for them at the time and thought that was pretty high.
Linda, is there a misconception that all movies are available online?
You bet there is. Most of these online streamers have to pay fees to the studios and the distributors to keep these things. And they'll pay a fee for, say, a year, and then it'll go out. It'll disappear. So they'll have things for a while. Like Netflix will have, they'll say, we have 4,000 titles, but they don't have the same titles all the time because they can't keep them. So there's a constant churn, and they get a lot of new things, but they don't keep the older things. And one of the things about the archive that we have is that it's ours and it's staying until it breaks entirely.
Linda, is there safety, comfort, and a kind of peace of mind that a piece of physical media has over digital media for you, but also for us as the collective people?
Well, I would hope so. I'm not sure, but with the younger generations are so much more attuned to the digital experience than we older people are. But it is a very different, intangible experience. It's a cold experience. There's something warm about coming into a site where there's a bunch of stuff all around you and you can pick it out and you can talk about it, and there are other people in there who are talking about it. And we've had at least 3 couples have been married through meeting in the store. And that's when we always talk about community, and that's what we're really talking about. It's the digital community, I think, is a cold community. It's a distant one.
A cold one.
And yeah, cold in the sense that a warm community is like you and me.
Yeah.
We're sitting here talking.
Right.
We can see each other. We're communicating in real time. That may be real time, but does it feel that real?
Sure.
When I'm on there, it doesn't feel that real. It feels like I can get a lot of information, but I can't get that satisfaction of having contact with people and walking. And, it's part of that urban environment that I think is very important, the streetscape and the rest of it. I will say, too, though, that I think that there's maybe it's part of the steampunk movement that people are going back to things like typewriters and they're physical typewriters, and they're going back to records, vinyl. I'm sure it's a niche market, definitely, but it's coming back because things do tend to roll back around again, and I think we're starting to see the edges of that. And one of the reasons we decided not to just close down was that we felt that we might be riding that tiny little wave, that little rivulet into shore.
Another angle, I think, Linda, to the streaming is that, and I read this somewhere, that one of the impacts of streaming services is that, and the quote that I read is, we're at the mercy of what corporations want you to see.
Yes, and there's a whole nother problem there. Corporations are also cold, soulless. I mean, I'm something of a radical here in being anti-corporate. But when I see these enormous mergers like the one that's happening between AT&T and Time Warner, which is a big distributor of all sorts of entertainment content, that to me is frightening because these people will control what we see and what we don't see. Unless you can come to some place like the Naro Expanded Video Archival Library, and then whammy.
And be your own curator.
And there you are, yes.
What's the largest late fee or fine you've issued someone, like dollar amount?
Oh, I think we once had one that was about $225.
Do you remember for what film?
No. It was years ago. Most people bring them back very readily. But we do have a lot of people who are in the Navy, and they will, bless their hearts, forget when they go out to sea.
Sure.
So generally what we'll do with them is we give them something, a discount or something. Oh. We don't push them.
Here are some numbers that I'd like to hear your thoughts on. 30,000 video stores in 1989. Hollywood Video closes in 2010. Blockbuster Video closes in 2013. Can you talk about that? Those?
Wow. Yeah, it used to be one on every corner. There were at least 5 or 6 in Norfolk alone. Mostly they were Blockbusters, which tended to buy in bulk the things that are coming right out. So they would have about 15 copies of Blonde movies or something,
Right.
and then they wouldn't keep that stock. So they had nothing, in the history, no back stock. And that was a problem for them, I think, because you have the same thing, you can get it anywhere. So we kind of blocked that.
When Blockbuster shut down in 2013, was there some kind of minor rejoicing on your end, but also some healthy fear as well?
Major rejoicing, because we absolutely hated Blockbuster. They were so aggressive and so full of themselves.
Towards you?
Not toward us specifically, but just towards film. They would just, oh, these are movies, and we just throw them away, and we don't care, and all of our stores look alike, and it was just like cookie cutter. Bring their dogs in. It doesn't matter.
You had 3,000 movies back in 1996, and you have close to 50,000, 44, 46?
43, I think. We're all arguing over that, but I would say it's probably 43,000, which is a considerable amount.
Right. And the numbers that we just talked about, statistics show that video stores are no longer commercially viable. And there's more ways than ever to watch a movie at home with the various streaming services like Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Prime. But talk about the importance of keeping the collection together and the value that it has, not necessarily as a monetary value, but why it's important for other reasons.
Well, I call it, I made the name up, an archival library, because it is a library, but it's also an archive, which means, the collection is stable, and it has a number of old and rare things in it, which are important. You notice I'm making this kind of gesture of patting the table, stroking the table, because I feel that way about this. In a way, it's a holdover from my experience with art. You go to a museum and you see the original thing. You see the object, and that's important to me. But then we decided that, all of this is really very educational, and that goes back to, my past as well. So that I see film as not just entertainment. That's only one part of it. It can be very important, but it's also educating people about history and culture and art and everything.
Can you coexist in a streaming world?
Sure, we are doing it. Yeah, and we're not going to make tons and tons of money. We never have. We've always run very close to the edge with that, but that's not the point of it. You're going into an area where I think a lot of people tend to think about streaming and corporations and just objects in general. How much are they worth? How it's to us, it's not how much they're worth monetarily, but how much they're worth in terms of the culture and the history of the whole damn world. I mean, we've got films on absolutely everything, from glacial environments to Italian cinema, and you can get a sense. It's education. Yeah. That's what we are.
One of the ways you may be able to coexist alongside streaming video services is by your decision to become a nonprofit. How did the decision to become a nonprofit come about?
Well, it actually came about because I was bemoaning the situation at the store and saying, we're going to have to close. This was about 2.5 years ago. And I was out with my grad students. After the class, a lot of my women grad students, and I would go out. And we would have a little dinner, and we'd have a glass of wine, and we'd, just have a good time. And when I started talking about this, 2 of them sat up and said, oh, we just need to go nonprofit. And I said, I have no idea how to do that. And they said, we do. That's what we do. And I had not known that was what they actually did as a profession. So they got the ball rolling for us. It was not easy. It is not easy to become a nonprofit. You have to go to lawyers. You have to go to the government. You have to have, tax IDs, all this stuff.
Mountains
Everything
of paperwork.
changes. Mountains of paperwork.
Yeah.
It was sweaty.
Naro Expanded Video Archival Library had a wildly successful Kickstarter campaign back in 2017. By the second day, you had reached your goal of $25,000, and the campaign was extended.
Yes.
Did the success of the Kickstarter campaign make you see your store in a different way?
No, it just reinforced what we knew about the store. We know it's a damn good place. So we were dancing.
I had a question about rent. Isn't rent still rent? So how will becoming a nonprofit library alleviate the daily cost of keeping the store open?
In a way, it doesn't, because we still have to pay, the electric bills and the business insurance and all of the different taxes from the city. Do you know that the city of Norfolk has a rental tax?
I would believe it.
Yeah, they do. And so we have to pay a certain amount 4 times a year on a rental tax. We have to pay the state. We have to pay federal taxes, which they don't for nonprofit. But the state takes taxes. And then we have a very high rent bill.
How long do you and the movie theater, and I know they're separate entities.
Yeah, they are.
But how long do we have to wait until somebody sort of swoops in the city of Norfolk and sort of kind of flips it so that like these are kind of historical places that we all sort of agree are going to be here?
Do you know anybody who could tell us that in city government? Because we'd surely like to know. I think the argument for that would be a good one.
I mean, I know kind of the names of people. I don't have any connections. That's what you're
I'm
asking
so sorry
me.
you don't, nor do we. But that would be a good thing if the city stepped in and said, well, this is something that makes Norfolk special, like Dumars.
Yeah.
It makes Norfolk a great place.
Like a historical landmark.
Yeah, in a way they are. I think that the city could give us more help. Mm-hmm. And probably if we talk to the right people, but we haven't found those people yet. We're going to have to go to people and say, can you help?
Dr. Linda McGreevy, you grew up mostly in Savannah, Georgia. You were an only child, and you've said your parents were loving and nurturing, who helped you to develop a creative mind. How did they do that? Like, what specific things or methods did they do?
They were such individuals. Leonard McGreevy, my father, and Mildred McGreevy met during the war in 1944 on a blind date, and they got married about 2 weeks later, and were totally devoted to each other. They tried to have other children, but my mother wasn't able, so there I was all by myself. And the fact that I was a girl didn't seem to matter to my father. He was very sweet to me, very supportive. If I wanted to, make art, that was fine. If I wanted to go to college, that was fine. If I didn't, he didn't care. They were just not pushy about what they wanted me to be, and they allowed for an awful lot of experimentation, which I liked.
You went to the University of Georgia and earned a PhD in art history.
Yeah.
Was there pressure from your parents to major in a subject that was more practical or more marketable?
No, I never had any pressure like that. I never did. I started at the University of Georgia as an undergraduate, thinking I'd be an artist. And I lasted about a year because of the in loco parentis in 1963. It was just god-awful.
I'm not familiar.
You never heard of that?
No.
Oh, yeah. Well, in universities, they used to put a lot of strictures on women. We couldn't wear pants on campus. We couldn't smoke on campus. Not that I did that. We couldn't go out on dates after a certain amount of time. We couldn't go anywhere with anybody. Oh, it was awful.
Public university.
Yeah, it was the University of Georgia, public university. And that was standard practice. So I didn't like the atmosphere up there. I thought it was too restrictive. My parents never treated me like that.
Was that because it was in the South, or was that across the country?
I think it was across the country. I think that was just really standard with women. We were controlled. We were controlled. The guys were, all over the place, panty raids every night, that sort of thing.
You said in an interview that it was important to you and important to your generation of art historians to bring women artists into focus, that women had been ignored. What were those conversations like? And women had been ignored by who specifically? By professors, industry leaders, curators, editors?
You just named them all. You named every last one of them. They had been ignored. Dealers would not have women in their stables, as they used to call us. Because you couldn't sell women's art. Museums, when they had women's art, and they did, they'd put it either on the staircase, like the Met Museum would do to some women, or they'd put it in a back room. They'd never show it. It was very, very rare to get a hold of and see the women who had made art for centuries. So in the mid-'70s, as part of the women's movement, those of us in the art world said, wait a minute, what has been going on, all this time? We need to get women respected, bring them in, and we did. It took a long time, and it's still going on. But it was a concerted effort on the part of a whole bunch of young professional women, myself included.
How did you find your way to teaching?
Oh, that happened during my graduate years. I didn't think about it at first, but I certainly didn't think about museums. I just thought, I really like to talk about art, and I had a professor who had a modern class, and he wasn't able to teach it one semester, so I taught, the history of modernism to. I taught to a couple of the B-52s.
Really?
Yeah, they were terrible students. They were awful. They never came to
Athens,
class.
Georgia?
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. The Bs that's where they started.
Linda, you once said that one of the reasons you became a teacher is that you didn't like how some of your teachers taught art, and you believed that you could do it better. How did the others teach? And what specific things did they do that you felt you could do better?
Well, it was the old canon, the canon of there's the great male like Michelangelo and all these other little people around him, and then there was so and so, and then there was so and so, and here are their dates. Memorize these dates. Memorize them right now.
What were your fears about teaching when you first started?
Oh, I was so nervous. I would shake. And then I'd go in and I'd be all right. The only thing was just facing a room full of people, until I realized that I knew enough about the topic that I could handle it.
And did you know that after the second week, the second year? When did
Second year. I was pretty much a mess for the first year. Yeah. It was quick.
Yeah.
It was quick.
How have you changed your approach? Have you changed your approach or style of teaching in the 40 plus years you've been teaching?
Wow. Yeah, I have actually. One of the things that evolved for me was the notion that art sits at the tip of the culture. So it visualizes something about the culture. And I'm one of many art historians of my generation who changed the canon in that way, or helped to change the canon, in that we talk about the political situation, the social situation, the familial and personal situation. One of the big things that we've always said was the personal is political, is aesthetic, is whatever, that encompasses that. So talk about the personal life, but in the context of.
Tell me your secret of lecturing. What is it that you understand that's made you so respected in terms of the form of lecturing? Tell me how you approach that.
Well, you can't stand there and read your notes. I did that for a while, for a few years. Everybody does. And then I thought, oh, hell, I'm not even paying attention to them most of the time. So I walk around a lot and think. And I tell stories. I tell a lot of stories about people I've met and things I know about, and all this sort of thing. So I'm very entertaining. I think it's half acting. I'm probably an actor at heart, but it really is. I mean,
it's a performance.
And that's what people really like about it. Plus, they're so astonished I've got all this information. Well, after 40 years, I should have all this damn information. If I don't, I'm not doing my job.
My wife had you as a professor.
Yes, she did.
When she was in college, and she described it as like having a family friend tell a story.
Yes.
And that you didn't feel like you were in class. You've heard that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad she took it that way, because that's the way I meant it. To me, it is telling stories, and it's a visual thing. So, and once PowerPoint came in, that was just perfect, because I can throw all this information up, like 5 or 6 images, and just start talking about them,
Mm-hmm.
and point back and forth to every one of them, and just weave this thing. It's like weaving a tapestry. And in fact, I just gave up testing in the normal way a long time ago, so that I would have people write all sorts of unusual essays about putting themselves into a particular time with the artist, and they meet the artist somehow. And how would that happen? And be sure that if you're dealing with Matisse, you do not have any jet travel.
Right.
Don't do that.
Right.
But put yourself into the time.
My wife said that she never had tests or exams, and one class that she took was a split-level class with graduate students and undergraduate students. And instead of an exam on the day that the exam would have been, the graduate students were assigned a specific artist who they had to research, and then on the day of the final exam, they had to come dressed as that artist, like inhabit the character.
Yes.
And then the undergraduate students portrayed journalists or kind of posed as journalists who posed questions to the artist.
Exactly.
How did you, I mean, it's a brilliant idea.
Thank
and
you.
when you hear it, it seems kind of like a very obvious, good way to show your understanding as a graduate student, but also as like an undergraduate who's sort of walking up the path to knowledge.
Right.
But like, how did you even come up with that?
I can't remember. It seemed natural. After I had them do papers in which they investigated things in that time, let's say, I said, well, why don't I just get the graduate students to handle the students, the undergraduates in their group, and then become these people? And everybody had such a good time. They dress up. And it was so wonderful. And the students enjoyed it so much. And you know what? They remember that information.
Right. They retain the information.
They retain it. If I said, you got to have March 12th, 1639, they would only know that, and they would hate that artist. Mm-hmm. But they love this.
Right.
So it's just a weird way of trying to get people involved on an emotionally intellectual way.
I want you to answer this question, if possible, so that you can do a little teaching to me. When you approach a painting or a piece of art for the first time, what do you do? How do you approach it? Are there specific steps? Like, what goes through your mind? Like, to put it more simply, how do you look at art?
How do I look at art? Yeah, that's always a good question. I look at the piece. I look at its formal qualities. What is it? Is it a sculpture? Is it in the round? Is it, so it's sort of described these things.
The medium.
The medium, the way that the artist is working, the materials. And then you look at the subject matter. Sometimes that hits you first. Usually that does hit you first, if you got subject matter. So what's the subject matter? And you do think about that for a while. And then you go to the part that's subterranean, and that's the content, the meaning of the piece. And that is like this great delta that goes in all directions. And that is not an immediate thing. That you have to think about for a while.
If you were to take me to the museum and we were to stand in front of a painting, should I get up close? Should I stand far back? How long should I give myself with the painting in order? Like, what's an appropriate amount of time? And I don't know if that is a stupid question, but like on a very practical way, like, what do I do?
Okay. First you do is you get yourself loaded with some sweet stuff like a cake. And so that you have the energy to stand wherever you're going to need to stand. And you don't try to look at everything in the damn place, because I've been known to run through museums looking for something. And sometimes it'll jump out at me, and sometimes I know it's there and I'm looking for it. And sometimes I encounter it and I didn't realize it was going to be there. So sometimes there are those moments of a kind of epiphany. But other times you just have to, you don't look at everything in a museum, for Christ's sake. Pardon my French, but oh my God, you'll drive yourself insane. Pick something out and look at it. Something that just will attract you for God knows whatever reason. Its size, its color, its location. Some rooms you won't even look at anything. Wander. Mm-hmm. And you won't know where you're standing when you start to look at it. But in order to really look at something like, say, a Cézanne, you got to get up close to it, as close as the guards will let you. Sometimes the guards are very funny about those things. So, and you know what the worst thing is that damn Mona Lisa in the Louvre. Oh my God, there are too many people going, oh, my feet hurt, can't wait up, you can't get near it. Right. It's behind 2 tons of glass, it's a little tiny thing.
And it's much smaller than...
And it's a little tiny thing, yeah. So it's meaningless to you. And why even go and see it?
How often do people get what the artist has in mind as the takeaway from a piece of art?
Who knows? Who knows? Who knows what, that's something when you start to really dig into an artist's intentions, you find out what they meant.
How do artists feel about how correct or incorrect people can be? How do the artists themselves feel about
Oh, they're pretty touchy, actually. I've had many a battle with artists in the way that I approach their work. When they mean something, they mean it, and you may not get it, You throw that thing out there, it has a life of its own.
Is it different to look at a piece of art when there's an empty room and nobody's there as opposed to when it's bustling with people? Can the same piece be different?
Oh, yeah, it definitely can be different. I prefer a room where there's very few people.
It's been said that nobody ever cried when looking at a painting. Is that true in your experience? And if so, why don't people cry at paintings? People cry all the time during movies, music, plays, sports. Why not art?
Well, plays are, in time, they develop. The words, they can pick on you, they can get to you. Mm-hmm. The situation is developed in a real sense. A painting is a painting. A sculpture is a sculpture. It's an object. It isn't the real thing. It's a representation of something. So you have to be pretty into it to get into tears. I'm trying to think that I've ever cried at anything like that. I've been astonished. I've been overwhelmed, but I've never cried.
Is that a strange thing to think about, that may be true?
No, because I understand that it's a work of art. It's not real in the sense of being an emotional moment that, it is in time. Mm-hmm. It's there. It's solid. I'm trying to think of the word, but it's not solid. It's just there, right there. Then it's interesting.
Linda, this is my last question.
Mm-hmm.
When someone comes to you and says, "Tell me what's the purpose of art," what do you say?
The purpose of art is to show you life.
Dr. Linda McGreevy, thank you so much for coming on the show. It means a lot to me.
It means a lot to me, too. I'm not often able to talk about art these days.
I'm glad you came on the show.
Thank you.
This is Andrew Paul Cronin, and you've been listening to the Q&A with A.P.C. To hear archived episodes, visit QAAPC.com. For exclusive content, including upcoming shows, behind-the-scenes pictures, and more, follow the show on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at QAAPC. The executive producer of the Q&A with A.P.C. is Ben Riley. The music was arranged by Soup.